Deputy Executive Director here at Arena and have worn many digital hats in the past. Excited to be chatting.
Thanks, Steph.
Uh, yeah.
Go ahead.
And just a note, this is Arena and we're here and excited to be training. And last fall we joined Zinc Collective, which has many different programs and are working to deliver persistent democratic majorities and recruit, develop, and retain exceptional talent. And part of today's programming is helping you be the best digital staffer you can be. A little housekeeping. The session will be recorded and we'll email you the recording tomorrow. You will have access to the slides tomorrow. We'll also send those around along with some toolbox tools. We'll be dropping links throughout today's training, but we'll also send them out in a recap tomorrow. And if you do have questions, please use the Q&A function so it doesn't get lost in the chat. And you can find the thumbs up next to someone's question if you like it and upvote it so we make sure we get to the most popular questions.
If you've been to an arena training before, you might recognize these norms. As we are here together for the next hour, we ask that you please respect, empower, and include everyone, including your fellow participants. We ask that you're present. Please participate fully in conversations. We have some polls and things, and the chat is a little bit active on arena training, so we encourage you to take advantage of the time that we have here. We also ask that you make space and take space. So if you're someone who asks a lot of questions, who is dominating the chat, we ask maybe that you step back a little bit. And if you're someone who is a little bit more reserved, who usually participates a little bit more quietly, we'd love to hear from you. Maybe push yourself to take up a little bit more space if you're comfortable. It's also a kindness, and we really love seeing everyone's face. If you're able to be on video, it really helps us out here at Arena to get to know the members of our community. And it's just a kindness to trainers. It really helps us to kind of see how things are hitting, to understand where things might need a little bit of extra clarification, or maybe where points have already been made and we can kind of move quicker. So if you're able to use video, we really appreciate it. We understand that not everyone's going to be able to be on video all the time. Please feel free to go off if you're eating or if you need to do something around the house. But if you're able to, we really appreciate it. And here's what we're going to cover today. So, we are about to jump in with a little bit of background and a little bit of level setting. But most of this session today is going to be spent on really determining if a moment is ours, and if so, how we're going to meet our moment, how we'll show up there. And the second half will speak a lot about the processes that we will use to kind of support our posting. So that is what we are going to cover today. Deborah, do you want to give us a little bit of background?
I would love to. As you all know, the field of digital is fast evolving. It was a hot topic after the last presidential election, and everyone's kind of working hard to figure out how we connect with voters online, including our sister organization that's part of Zinc Collective, DigiDems. Last year, they ran a 4-week program, digital bootcamp, to strengthen digital programs and improve how they worked internally and get more confident showing up online. We all know Democrats have a long way to go to communicate authentically and connect with voters online, and this was a way to kind of accelerate and jumpstart that and experiment. So a lot of the learnings in this deck and training come from lessons they learned, and we're really excited to be able to take what they learned and spread it far and wide.
I think the main thing that we learned is that when campaigns miss a moment online, it's usually caused by uncertainty. It's usually not that the moment just passed them by and they didn't notice. It's that we weren't sure if it was our moment to comment on, or we weren't sure exactly what to say. So, a lot of what we're going to cover today is going to be addressing these common sources of uncertainty. So, on the next slide, there are a few common sources of uncertainty, and this is what we see a lot. So, I think we can move to the next one. The first one is what to respond to, or is this our moment? But then once we've decided it's our moment, we have to decide what to say. So determining how to meet the moment. And this is a hidden one that people might not be able to identify, but I think as we get going into it, it's going to make a lot of sense. There is this uncertainty around what process to follow, how to get the idea posted, how to get from conception to an actual tweet or an actual reel, what have you. So these are kind of the things that we're going to talk through. And The first one is determining whether or not it's our moment. So we have this crisis decision loop framework, and we will send you the slides. So don't feel like you need to write things down furiously, but if you'd like to, you're welcome to take a screenshot as well. And the loop is this: the news breaks, and we're talking about these high emotion stories that are really dominating conversation. These are the ones that are on the news, they're showing up in your feed. And then you ask yourself, is this story connected to us? Is this in our lane? And to determine that, you think about, is this referencing our values? Are there any tensions here that are like things that we on our campaign are grappling with or that our voters are grappling with? And if the answer to those questions is yes, then it's probably in your lane. And in that case, you need to activate your practice workflow and get going on getting a post. So, this is all just to say that being prepared is critical to making sure that you are certain on how to respond. And doing that, to be prepared, you have to start thinking about these things before news cycles begin. So we encourage you, and we'll show you some example documents, to have a document that lays out your values. What do you believe? Listing them out in bullet points is fine. The tensions, where are you tested? Where is your campaign showing up? What are the fights that you're dealing with? And when we speak. And when you do this, you want to think about, where does your risk aversion show up most? Because there's this uncertainty. It's not like, oh, if we post, are people going to like this or not? That might be part of it, but there's also maybe a risk involved. So we need to be thinking about, on our teams, where is our risk aversion showing up the most as we're moving through? And I think Deborah has an example that hopefully will bring this framework to light.
Yes. Okay. Take yourself back in time. Maybe it was just a week ago, maybe it was a month ago, who knows? And you wake up to these headlines. US and Iran pause their attacks after days of escalation. US pauses attacks on Iran for a second straight day. Okay. And if you're working on a campaign right now, uh, put yourself in those shoes, as you probably already are, or if you're at an organization. And if you're not, you can either answer this question as for your favorite candidate, or pretend you're working on a red to blue congressional in the Midwest. Okay, so that's who you are. You wake up to these news stories. You're in charge of deciding if your organization or campaign posts online. So revisit the crisis decision loop. The news has broken. You ask, is this related to our values? The tensions, is it in our lane? If the answer is yes, you activate your practice workflow, which means you get working on figuring out what to post. If no, you get another day of doing whatever you were planning to do that day. So think
Living your
about,
life. Yeah.
which was also probably pretty busy. Think about the news breaking, this crisis decision loop. And now it is time for a poll. Do you post something in reaction or do you not? Obviously, we don't know who your campaign is. You feel free to put it in the chat or ask a question, but there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer, but just take a second to think about that. We've got
48% participation. Okay, it went up to 51. We
keep
appreciate
going.
you. Keep going. Is this in your lane or not? It's a it's not quite an even split, but we're a team divided right now. All right, we're gonna give the poll just 30 more seconds. So if you haven't voted and you want to, it's anonymous, we can't see who's saying what. All right, I'm going to end it and share the results so you can see. So it looks like only about 43% of us, 10 of us, said that we're going to post something, that this is in our lane. And 60% of us, 57%, said, nah, this is not in our lane. Deborah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that there are certainly organizations that it doesn't make sense to post, and I think international war and also international affairs can often feel not in the lane of organizations in particular. I think one of the things we want to get across in this training is people are reacting to the news and reading things and experiencing the news and are looking for leaders to tell them what to think or tell them what's going on or tell them their perspective, and that there is, value to being strategic and not just reacting to everything all the time, but there is value to uh, getting a little bit out of your comfort zone or talking about topics that your community is probably reacting to and focused on, but might be sort of a little bit out of your comfort zone to post normally, but it's a skill you can build up. And the other thing I'll add is you one of the things that happens in that risk aversion is people sort of freeze or get paralyzed and you don't know how to get unstuck when you're like what's really happening is there's a part of the organization or campaign that is risk averse and they're not even necessarily articulating that that's what's happening. They just are sort of delaying or not answering or not approving because they don't know they don't feel comfortable and they don't know how to get to a yes. And so we'll talk about it later, but part of getting to a that practice of posting and process is like assessing when you're in that freeze or paralysis or an unfamiliar situation. What do you do in those moments? Jess, I'll see what else you have to say about our poll results.
Yeah, I'm curious if someone who said no, this is not in our lane wants to raise their hand and share why they think that. Or if someone who said yes, this is in their lane wants to raise their hand and share. Go ahead, Dion. I'm sorry if I didn't say your name right. Dion?
Oh, that's perfect. Yes, thank you. Also, thanks for, I'm glad to be here. So my initial reaction was, well, it'll probably be different tomorrow. So I'm not sure if we should spin up, get away from our regular, actions for the day to react to something that
Right.
trying to tell us happened.
Yeah. And I'm hearing kind of two things. One is like this might be a distraction for staff, and like maybe we're doing other things right now that wouldn't make it like reasonable to like stop what we're doing and post about this. But the other thing is this might take us off of our core message. Maybe we have something that we're trying to focus on right now with our communications, and this might be a little bit of a distraction from that. Thank you for sharing that. I also saw someone in the chat saying perhaps we might want to wait and see how this lands, give the issue time for the public to kind of react to it and see what they're going to say. So I think that's another consideration. Somebody who said, yeah, this is actually in my lane. Do you want to raise your hand and share why you think that?
We've got a comment in the chat about how war impacts affordability, which is a really good way of maybe you're not an organization that's used to commenting on this, but maybe you are talking about affordability. I think someone's got their hand raised
Well,
though.
yeah, James, do you want to share?
So yes, I was the person in the chat that said like, you let it sit with the community for a little while to see how it's landing with them. Um, Recently here in Wilmington, like we had a police shooting and it was controversial because of the details and because of the individual that lost his life. And of course, as a candidate, you have initial thoughts. You know what I mean? It's definitely in your wheelhouse, police brutality and that sort of thing. But, you know, and out of respect for the family, wanting to make sure that there's like a proper investigation and all of those things. Like sometimes it's just prudent to let things develop a little bit before you jump off the porch and start saying things that might inflame parties in either direction.
Yeah, so I think what you're talking about is this tension between like risk aversion and risk tolerance, and like what is the right amount of risk that you want to assume in terms of public perception, backlash, etc., and also just like being values aligned and making sure that you're saying the right thing. Thanks for coming off mute and sharing that context. That's really difficult to have to live in real time and balance in real time, much more difficult than these like hypothetical situations. So I appreciate your talking that through with us. Garland, do you want to share? Garland, you have your hand up. Maybe not on purpose. Okay, this one maybe not as clear cut of an example, but Deborah, do you want to take us to another one? We're going to keep having this conversation.
Yeah, and before we dive into another example, we're going to look at a candidate who may not have been elected official, may not be reacting to those exact headlines, but just an example of content you can post.
Prices in the plan. We're just using up so many of our.
I want to get you back to the beginning of it. Let's see. Oh no. Okay.
Briefing on Iran, and I can say with even more clarity and certainty. Just got out of another classified briefing on Iran, and I can say with even more clarity and certainty than before that there is absolutely no plan. And of course, the irony is that we hear from this administration, including from military officials, everything is going according to plan. So let me ask, where was doubling oil prices in the plan? Where was using up so many of our critical munitions in the plan? Where is the plan? And so far, Trump is not only losing the war, he's losing the peace. So I ask, once again, what's the plan? Just got out.
So, in this example, one thing that is of note here is it's a really easy video to make, right? It's just, you need to own equipment. So you need that he's holding a mic that is not that expensive, but is a microphone. So your team would need to have that mic. And this is probably shot on a phone. It might be shot on a nicer camera. But, it's presumably a newer phone with a clean lens, and then they are outside with nice light. And he had to think about what he was going to say, but it's not highly produced. There's not a ton of editing. They did put on captions. And so, one thing that I think can feel hard about rapid response or responding to situations is like making the content. Like you're a human, so you're processing whatever's happening. And then you have to get your team on board with what you want to say. And then you need to make the content, and content creation takes creativity. And a lot of times, I think lots of us would love to live in a world where we have days to think of our concepts and stuff. And but this is kind of an example of you can make a video pretty quickly. Like this probably didn't take that long to film or edit. And it's just talking directly to his constituents, and it's not even making a ton of statements. He's literally just updating people on what happened. And we all know it's a growing number of people get their news online and rely on individuals or influencers that they trust over news sources. And so one thing we want to sort of put in your brains today is thinking about what is your role in informing your community, updating them, and just like keeping them updated with what's happening when news is breaking. And he also did a great job of connecting this issue back to home, back to prices, back to things that are maybe part of his core message, and did that work of like, what is the messaging he's trying to get across? Presumably, it's things around lowering prices and then talking about that. So
Yeah,
not like the rock star example, but just an example of like something that sort of is within reach and doable without a huge team or a ton of resources.
right.
Just
And
for you.
I think there's like, I asked this question in the chat, what do you see in terms of values? He's not making a value statement about Americans deserve XYZ explicitly, but there is an implicit value in here of this value of planning and being like intentional about decision making, and the tension of, okay, these things are happening. It's clearly not intentional. It's clearly not aligning to this value that our team has of like having a clear plan and communicating that plan with people. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a value that's like a high level moral value. It could also be like this like more strategic value of like planning, etc., that you can obviously express in your plan or your guidance document, and then see how these moments can interact with those things. this was not a very risky video to post. This was not taking a stance on what should happen in the Middle East. This was just something that this is a common sense value that we have, and we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, it's a great point. Like he did not suggest what we should do with our foreign policy. He just said this is not it, which is not that risky. Okay, on to the next scenario. So this is kind of a conclusion we want you to take to heart is if a national moment shows up in your voter's life, it is your moment. And how do you make national moments local? How do you make them connect them to your values, your organization, your messages that you're trying to get across, and building up that skill. Not we certainly can't react to every single thing that happens. We would,
We'd just be reacting
yeah,
all the time.
we wouldn't be here. You'd just be, But I think generally organizations on our side and candidates probably could be reacting to more things and talking to people more. And so it's a skill to build and a process to build. Okay, next example, a lot less uh,
Lower stakes.
lower stakes on most people's lives, but did take the internet by storm. And there's always a question, there's things that are happening in people's real lives and things that are happening online. And there's, as a digital practitioner, we're always trying to say, how can we seize this moment? How can we be a part of the conversation? How can we be exciting? So take yourself back to the great Crackle Barrel debacle and the announcement that the CEO was stepping down.
This was new. The CEO stepping down is breaking news right now.
Yes.
I'm excited. Anyway, continue.
I think Jess is ready for a Crackle Barrel DM if you're interested. Okay. So once again, put yourself in the shoe of your current organization or campaign, or your favorite candidate, or if you don't have either of those, a red to blue congressional race in the Midwest. Do you post something about this or not? The poll is live. We're at a 44% participation.
We're going to leave it open for 40 more seconds. I will say, let's just assume that you have the campaign resources to post. Let's not make it a question of like, do I post about this or nothing else? Could this be in your lane? This may be the question. Okay, 10 more seconds. Tick tock, tick tock. People are saying don't post. I don't know if I'm aligned. All right. Here are the results. Deborah, what do you think?
I think that there is opportunity to connect this to, there is opportunity to have some fun. I think it can be hard to come up with witty, fun banter, and it's kind of a little bit of luck, but there is an opportunity for that. I also think there's an opportunity to talk about jobs or wealth inequality or maybe something going well in your community as a counterpoint. I also don't think this is necessarily, it is the kind of thing to take a second and say, is our core audience paying attention to this? Are, is this something that will seem confusing to them? Um, is this an opportunity to bring new people awareness to our org if we, are part of this conversation? So I don't think it's straightforward. I think for me, it probably would depend if it was a slow week or if we were super busy with a week of action, I might not get distracted. But I'd love to hear your thoughts and other folks' thoughts.
I think this is another place where having guidance docs is important because you probably want to have brand guidance and not have to wonder like, okay, this is an opportunity for me to be a little bit snarky, a little bit funny online. Am I allowed to do that or not? So having brand guidance that's like, we will post this, but never this, which we'll see in a second, is going to help you make a decision here. Because I think this would be an easy thing to just make a quip about on Threads or Twitter, and just kind of move on. Okay. So I think our key takeaway here is that there is a lot of national news that people might not be commenting on because it doesn't feel like it's in our lane. But there is a lot of opportunity if we can connect it back to values, connect it back to something that is within our wheelhouse, to take advantage of some of these stories and be more present online. So, for example, if there is a federal budget cut, you might feel uncertainty about, well, is this really affecting us? But as we've seen in the chat, as we've been talking about, we can connect it to our brand, which is probably going to be anchored in cost of living or local jobs or some other value, and then respond by connecting it back to the district. So I think folks in the chat have already been saying this. I think we're very aligned. But the main point here is that you don't have to say the same thing that someone else might be saying. So you can connect it to your lane and have a completely different take on what that might look like. And that doesn't mean that you can't be a little bit snarky. So on the next slide, we have a direct-to-camera video that is by a state representative from Michigan, Jasper Martis. I'm not going to play the video. It's pretty long. It's just another direct-to-camera video. But I just wanted to highlight this person's brand is maybe a little bit snarky, maybe a little bit more off the cuff. So did a very serious direct-to-camera video with a little bit of a funny caption. Donald Trump erased a year of gains in the stock market in less time than it took me to grow this terrible mustache. So serious content, funny caption, and still got the point across really well. This post was pretty successful. This is a smaller campaign. It got some really good engagement and shares. Pretty low lift post there. And then we can see two other examples. Deborah, do you want to talk about these ones?
Yeah, so these are great examples of how to stay in your lane. And again, these are also just posts, right? They're not, I mean, I think Representative Peterson maybe is resharing a video, but there's one thing we all know, like we probably wish we had 10 times as many people on our digital team as we have, and it can be one of like the takeaways I hope you come away with this is like how do you set yourself up to respond rapidly to things? And some of it is having kind of like ideas around is this a quick video? Is this a short post? But these are both examples of the two different representatives reacting to the same piece of legislation, but staying in their lanes. So Representative Peterson is a mom who had a baby while in office, and her voice on budget cuts is shaped by being a mother. And so she's talking about her brand and what she wants to get across is things about motherhood, things about supporting families. And so that was what the content of her post was. And then Representative Whitesides is a former chief of staff of NASA, and he highlights the importance of science and NASA when talking about Trump's budget cuts. And so they're both talking about the same news, but pivoting it to their lane, what they're known for, what they're strongest on. And so it feels authentic. And so again, like Jess said, we'll get to the voice guides and the things, but part of stop posting scared and part of being ready to respond to things is building that skill and that process and that approval process of this thing happened, how does it relate to what we want to be saying, and then how do we say that, which is basic communications skills that but can be feel difficult or scary or more risky when you're going online about it, and sometimes it can feel easier not to post, but I want to encourage you to think about how to build a system that feels just almost as easy to post content.
Cool.
I'll
We
pass
have
it back to Jess.
Yeah, just a few more slides until questions. I think we have few enough folks here that we can use the chat for questions, but if you'd like to, you can also use the Q&A box. You can find that by going to the three dots at the bottom that say more and typing your question in, or when we have time for questions, you can just raise your hand and ask the question. So just start thinking about that. But I think what we've been hinting at so far is what should we say, basically. So We want to meet this moment. What should we say? How should we be thinking about that? And Deborah, I think, is going to share a little bit of a framework for having a strong voice, which is something that is going to be incredibly critical to making sure that you're prepared to know what to say when.
Okay, I was muted. In the dream world, you like have a team workshop or a retreat where you build out your team, your campaign voice, and you all get aligned. Most of us don't live in the dream world, but you can be building up these documents as you go, or these perspectives as you go. Like if something works really well, you can add it to a doc, or just start to write down these things, so that you can have more alignment in your approval processes. But the campaign voice is another way to say brand, or kind of like how your campaign, the tone and tenor of your how you speak. And so we looked at examples of people who come off as serious scientists or people who come off as witty young people with mustaches. And so figuring out what your organization or campaign voice is super important. And there is room for voice to be applied differently based on the audience or the platforms, but you want it to be consistent across, like consistent and modified. And lots of different companies do this really well, and certainly there are candidates and organizations who do this well. But if you think about, even someone as McDonald's or Nike, they have a voice that is familiar and it is adapted depending on the commercial or Twitter, but it's still, there's consistency. And so the three C's of campaign voice are consistency, and external, it makes your audience believe in your values and it builds trust. And internal, you're speaking with a unified voice across the platforms. Connection, you want to build trust and connection. And I think there's lots of different ways to build trust. The example we watched from Seth Moulton, he's building trust by being transparent and just giving a live update. Lots of people build trust by giving behind the scenes or providing reliable information, or offering up their community information that isn't just an ask for them to do something for them, but providing them resources. There's lots of different ways to build trust and connection. And internal, there's connection across channel department. So you're not, siloed across your communications team is putting out press releases in one voice that's very formal, and your digital team is super casual. You want to be connected. And then clarity. Who are you and who are you not? I think this can be a really good exercise to do, saying we are, you know, we are friendly, not, you know, witty. We are, and just do a couple of like, we are this, we are not that, to help you decide and assess content. You can also do, we're more, formal than informal, and just doing that exercise with yourself or with your team and is a really good baseline. And then internal, the clarity is how will you communicate, respond, and draft content? Who's drafting? Who's deciding that you are going to respond to something? What is that process? How do things get approved? And we have a whole workshop on campaign voice, but these are just a couple pieces that are um, good to have in your mind and as a framework for your program.
All
And
right.
now I'll pass it back to Jess to talk about one of our latest horrors.
Yes. So let's try to apply this to the cyclospora outbreak. So if you're not familiar, there's a parasite. It is in produce of some kind. We don't know. But go ahead and drop in the chat or raise your hand to share with 30 seconds or less how you might respond to this cyclospora outbreak in a way that is making it local, making it in our lane, kind of using all of the things that we've talked about so far in your campaign voice. What might you say? And we'll see an example. Go ahead, Garland.
Thanks. Sorry about my audio earlier. I am the National Communications Officer for Democrats Abroad France. We're the arm of the Democratic Party that supports and helps U.S. citizens outside the U.S. vote and register and vote. And so this was an easy one for us. We know it's affecting the family and friends of the people who are Americans who are living outside the U.S. But it really points for us. So we could talk about that but we really haven't. We've used this as an opportunity to talk about the unbelievable, the unqualified RFK Jr. appointment and the how he's destroyed any sort of evidence-based approach to public health. So I think that there are, for us, we have to be creative when we talk about things that are strictly US, but
Hmm.
it does allow us to talk about the kind of the big key issues, the corruption, the fact that he's padding his wallet. I'm sure there's a way he's making money from this, and the violence and death and suffering that he's causing. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm glad you're able to get your audio working. That was an excellent contribution. We also have some in the chat talking about linking it to the federal budget cuts, defunding of federal orgs, clear result of mishandling of our health department. Who we elect matters because they make decisions that determine how we're going to be experiencing things, adversely impacting high risk populations, lots of talk about budget cuts. Dinesh, do you want to go one more time or quickly? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'll just be quick. Thank you. I appreciate it. Because this is a safety issue, a public safety issue, I think that would be kind of the leading messaging that we would want to put out there. So I would want to kind of provide guidance and advisement to, at least my electorate and or beyond with what I'm doing to protect myself, my family, and where they can seek, I guess further information. I think that leading with that would demonstrate a level of leadership that
Hmm.
takes advantage of the moment, but also uh, builds in that sincere concern. And so I think that if we can address people's fears initially, it would lead to a larger conversation about, but what about our institutions? Why is there an outbreak? And hopefully, you can probably instigate that. But I think if you lead with a level of compassion and care for the
Yeah,
safety, it could lead to those deeper analyses.
thanks. Yeah, I think these are all really smart ways to approach this conversation. And I think it depends on what office you're holding and again, what your voice is. If you find yourself in a position where you don't have time to create a really, thoughtful response in terms of like all the resources that you want to provide to your community or all of the connections that you want to make to kind of these broader issues, I think it's also okay to kind of react relatively quickly, and still get some of these points across if you don't have time to kind of get this whole post ready to go. Really fast. So here's an example.
Before I heard the news about Cyclospora, I bought a bunch of berries. So question, do we think RFK Jr.'s CDC is going to find the source of the outbreak before or after my berries go bad so I can eat them without fear? Stay tuned and we'll find out.
Okay, this one was a little bit snarky as well. It was obviously a TikTok, so it was a shorter form piece of content. What worked with this example? Why was it an effective example? You can drop it in the chat or just come off mute. It's a very relatable piece of content.
Yeah, and James, that's one way to build trust, right? Like the you're just a person scrolling on TikTok, kind of trying not to think about this issue or stressed out about it, and then your elected representative or someone running for office seems just like you, is like, this sucks, what's going on? Is a way to build trust and build relatability. And so she's not necessarily recommending solutions or getting into the policy or even talking about how we got here, right? I mean, she's making an assumption you know who RFK is and you're pissed off about it too. But that makes her feel human and not like some person who's just in Washington or, is not connected to you. So it's not like this revolutionary piece of content. It's just a little touch point that builds trust that was, you know, easy to build. Easy
Yeah,
to create.
I appreciate that she's filming it. It appears to be in her kitchen. It appears that the phone is just on her counter and she's literally just holding up produce that she got from the grocery store. Like most of us go to the grocery store and get produce. So making herself, as we said, very relatable, plain language, double tap on everything Deborah said. I think everyone in the chat is dropping some really good points as well. Approaches the subject with a timeline. There's urgency there that she's building in. I think this is a great piece of content. And again, it kind of takes the pressure off to have this perfectly polished piece of content to put out, something that we can really just kind of film in one take, maybe two, and put out there. But this type of thing doesn't really work unless there are some really clear processes in place, which we're going to talk about in a second. I think we have one more example. So this is, I think, our last example. This is a MAHA-friendly bill for food warning labels and junk food ad bans. So how would you react to this? Or would you? Would you post anything about this? I think we can cut for time the conversation. Just want to say here, there's two very different ways that you could react. There's a myriad different ways that you could react. There's this one very snarky image that does a lot of heavy lifting with no text whatsoever from Governor Healy, the come and take it. And then there's also this extremely produced video that Perfect Union or More Perfect Union put out. So both of these were very effective pieces of content, got a lot of engagement and very different approaches. And I think the thing that I just want to highlight here is you don't have to be worried about putting out exactly the right piece of content every single time. Sometimes it is better to just get content out. And if you have the resources to, invest in a high production video, go ahead and do it. But I think this come and take it graphic took a few minutes on Canva to put together. And it was pretty effective at what it did.
And one thing I'll add to okay, I want to go back. The with things like health and RFK, there's this concept called inoculation when you are trying to combat disinformation. Um, you want to inoculate, like a vaccine, your community and your voters so that they're not, they're less likely to fall victim to believing misinformation and disinformation. And that means that they've heard from trusted sources, you know, the sky is blue. They know the sky is blue. So even if Donald Trump got on stage and said the sky is red, they'd be like, I believe, I know in my heart that's not true. And so there's real risks in not responding to disinformation or things that are intentionally being spread uh, as to misinform people, because if there's no counterpoint or no inoculation and you're not building trust on a topic, it sort of snowballs and can be harder and harder to get your voters or your community back to the truth. And so that's another reason to be thinking about just getting back and combating the disinformation as a voice in the narrative. And we know Republicans and the right wing apparatus is pumping out tons and tons of false information constantly. And your candidate or your organization has a role to play in fighting that and inoculating your community.
I think
So,
oh, go ahead. No.
great. Voters want candidates who can lead, especially when emotions run high. I think there's a little bit of a different perspective when you're an organization, but generally, candidates should stop posting scared, should think about how do you engage in moments, how do you take more risks, how do you connect and build authentic relationships with your community online, and how do you, comment on the things that they're thinking about and engaging with and not be absent from that conversation. And that is not to say it is easy, but this is a call to action to think about how your organization or campaign or official site is operating and think about how you can do stop posting scared and be the leader that people are looking for. But that all involves a process. So I think you might have noticed that the topic of warfare was a little harder to kind of wrap our heads around our role and what kind of content to post than poisoned food. And, there's different topics that are easier to react to or understand how to react to, and topics that are harder or less comfortable or more risk involved. And you want to build a process that can handle those and not leave you uncertain about things. So good processes reduce uncertainty and help us move from risk aversion to risk tolerance. So a risk averse approach is you wait for full approval before posting to reduce uncertainty. Risk tolerant is you have pre-approved tone, values, post first, refine later. So maybe there's a certain category of things you can say or certain topics you can say without getting sign off from your lawyers, for example. So you don't have to wait for your lawyers to approve your content unless it crosses a certain threshold. Risk averse, you treat every response as a fresh decision. Every time breaking news happens, it's a whole new process. Risk tolerant, you have a content library, repeatable, pre-approved content, or things that can be modified and approved quickly, things if there's content that might take someone a little bit of time to wrap their heads around, you've had those conversations in advance, and then you can kind of hit go on them. Risk averse, avoid uncertain or controversial topics, but at the risk of being quiet or not a part of the conversation. Risk tolerant, post about uncertain topics in certain pre-approved ways. Risk averse, when in doubt, is silent. And risk tolerant, when in doubt, you look to guidance. Jess, do you want to add anything to this slide?
No, I think the point will be made later on, but I just want to say that last point, when in doubt, look to guidance. If you don't have any yet, don't worry. Just start making it. It'll be okay. Okay, that's it. That's my ad.
So drum roll, please. We have a brand voice and messaging guide on our toolbox. That is a great place to start. So that link is being dropped in the toolbox. Recommend you download it and check it out, read through it, implement it, all those good things. These are two examples. It's really the tool in the toolbox is just like a two-page document. I think if you were to go to Nike's comms shop or marketing shop, they would probably have a whole book of a brand guide. We all know you probably don't have time to make that or the capacity. But this worksheet is pretty quick and is a great exercise you can do by yourself or with your team and get buy-in. Jess, do you want to touch on anything in this guide?
I think the other piece of approvals is on the second page, making sure that people know, like, for example, if you want to post like from the perspective of the candidate, if you want to post like from like a snarky piece of content, knowing what types of content are already approved versus not is incredibly important. And it is as important as having an approvals process for content that's not already pre-approved. I think there's another slide with another set of pages from this document. If you are someone that is maybe having a little bit of trouble trying to figure out what issues are in your lane and how to kind of approach messaging them, there is a worksheet for that as well. You don't have to do it for every single issue. 4 or 5 is probably enough. But then the other thing is to have clear rules and red lines. This can also really speed up the approvals process, making sure that there are things like if you want to always include end on a hopeful note or always include, I'm thinking about some examples that we saw, maybe always include a small piece of like self-deprecating humor or something like that, depending on what your brand is. Similarly, if you want to have things that are never approved, you can put those in there. So for example, if you're never going to use the F word in a post, or if you're never going to explicitly mention religion or something like that, maybe you should just write that out so everyone is on the same page. Deborah, anything you'd add there?
I think there's a real like mindset shift that you may have to encounter depending on the kinds of people on your team and their experiences. But even just less than a decade ago, the approvals process was focused on don't get a bad headline. When I worked on the Obama campaign, it was like don't do anything that could have a bad, you know, imagine if what you did landed on the front page of the New York Times, you would be representing the campaign, and that's, what you want to avoid. And so, and that has value and was a real meaningful strategy that was, bad press is risky. You don't want to be doing something negative. Times have completely changed, and obviously you don't want to do something that gets you ratioed or gets you going viral for the wrong reasons. But the reality is you're gonna have posts that hit well and do well, and you're gonna have posts that don't or cause negative attention. And we just all need to get sort of used to the fact that like there is gonna be bad days online, and that's the cost of getting good days, and the people will forget and move on. And when the president is the criminal he is, we're just sort of operating in a different reality. And so the work, I would recommend approaching this worksheet not just by filling it out, but really thinking about like what's the mindset we're going to bring to our risk tolerance, and how can we get people comfortable with that by having these guidelines and these processes.
Yeah.
And like what are we really losing versus gaining? And it's really, things are different now.
Yeah. What is the actual risk? If you get ratioed, oh no.
Right. Right. So many of you have probably lived through a wide range of approvals processes. There's lots of different ways to do them. You just want them to be clear and to remove as much friction as possible. And that involves trusting your staff, and clear processes in that worksheet are great. And so is hiring people you trust and hiring people with good judgment. Um, but one example of a approvals process is you conceptualize and create content. You get manager review and feedback. You might need leadership review and feedback. So a lot of times, I've worked at orgs where there's a bunch of things that don't need that third level of review, and then some do. And part of the skill of being a digital practitioner is like you can totally ask for more review and like gut check, and you need to be the one saying, actually, I'm not so sure this falls within our process. Let me get more approval, or I feel great about this. I'm going to process, or I feel comfortable with the risk. It also, if you're a manager, it's something to think about. How do you support your staff so they're comfortable taking risk? How do you have their back so that if they can move quickly, and then if something does go wrong, you're not going to throw them under the bus. You're going to, stand up for them and obviously give feedback and stuff, but it's not all on them. I think there's an evolving approach to approvals of like sending it around, and if no one says anything in 5 minutes, it can go live. And so this is an evolving space, but I think an underlooked one and a super important one. Just anything you want to add, or if anyone has an approval process they love, feel free to drop it in the chat.
Yeah, I think the last piece, the leadership review and feedback, I think that piece has been a critical piece for a really long time. And I think if we can get our leadership aligned on, if you're not talking about X, Y, and Z, I don't need to see it. Or if you're talking about ABC, then you have my blessing. I think that is a pretty good place to be in. And if your leadership is not there yet, I think the goal is to kind of, by the time we get to GOTV, by the time we get to October, having a process in place where there is enough trust that rapid response can happen in a truly rapid way. I think there might be an animation on this slide. Yeah, I think we've already covered all these bullet points there.
Wow. There you go. Who needs to be involved? How can we expedite? How will we communicate about the approval process transparently? How does this change during rapid response? I think that transparency is really important. Like if something does get shot down, the why, and that can, you're not necessarily going to do it in real time, but that can be a place to unpack like, hey, this got stuck in approvals because we actually were too concerned about the risk, but we couldn't articulate that, or we didn't know how to say, you can't do this, you can't do X, but you can do Y, is like where you want to get to with your approvals team. Like it's okay, things are gonna get shot down. It's okay to have some risk, aversion, but the key to success and something you need to push as a digital practitioner is like, okay, if you're gonna say no to this, what can we do? And like building up that skill and also that, those muscles.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say about approvals, because I just feel, I'm passionate, is that it can be helpful just as things get approved to have like little screenshots of them and just keep them in a running doc. And similarly, if things don't get approved, have screenshots of those with like why they weren't approved. And that can be a helpful guidance document later on if you need to delegate social media content creation to a different staffer or even to a volunteer if you're on a smaller campaign. Just having that side by side of like, this was approved, this wasn't, can be really helpful. Okay.
Yeah, there's an awesome suggestion in the chat of traffic light approach. Green, go ahead and post. Yellow, get review. Red, straight to leadership. I love things that are kind of like clear like that and can move fast. Back to you, Jess.
Thanks. So, a couple of key takeaways, and then we might have time for one or two questions. I see, Dinesh, you have your hand up. So, the first key takeaway is that uncertainty is the enemy. So, we want to be prepared to determine if a moment is in our lane, if it is in our lane, what you'll say and what processes you'll use for approval. Being prepared is critical to that. I think the other key thing that we want to emphasize is that if a story is showing up in your voters' lives, it's probably in your lane, and it is probably riskier for you not to comment on things than to comment on things, as we've kind of already talked about. But through good process, we can turn risk aversion into risk tolerance. Look to guidance if you're in doubt. Start creating guidance if you're guidance list right now. And this whole thing is just iterating towards perfect. There's never going to be a perfect piece of content or even a perfect approvals process, especially when we're talking about processes that involve multiple people. They're going to take time to build and to refine. So just make one useful move with every single post that you make and build that process as you go. It might not even be a document at first. It might just be a Slack message. Hey, do you want to see more of this or less of this, etc. And then build that into your process and your guidance documents. Those are our key takeaways. Deborah, anything else you would add?
Just stop posting scared and forge ahead. The internet is a brave new world every day.
Agreed.
Awesome. Thank you all for being here and sharing in the chat and hanging out with us. We have time for, yeah, one or two questions. Feel free to drop them in the Q&A.
Dinesh, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the entire presentation. I'm just having challenges with kind of reconciling all the different areas that we explored. So for me, I imagine messaging and getting your word out, messaging out there with through digital means is an extension of the leader and or leadership, and so there needs to be kind of a foundational understanding of where you need to move from. But then, and I was trying to post it in the chat. Is it are we it depends on your leadership style and approach, right? If you're values oriented, that is going to at times challenge your goal orientation. So if you're trying to secure an election, and speaking on something might cause, I guess, more effort than you have the bandwidth for. Um, how do you reconcile that? How do you create a cohesive message when you know that it might be counterproductive to your strategy for a particular focused goal, but your values say otherwise. And the values part is also a reflection of your leadership. You wanted to be in this position to help, your community, and your community is leaning on you for that guidance. And so for you to be strategically silent during that time could be counterproductive. So, you're going to take away from your strategy, or you're going to take away from your integrity at some levels, right? And so how is that reconciled, especially when you have it removed, when you have multiple staffers, potential volunteers working on your messaging, and you're that much more removed from it?
Yeah, I think this is where that guidance document really comes in, and having those clearly defined values, because I don't think you should ever be in a position where speaking in a values aligned way is in contradiction to your strategy. I think that it is strategic to be values aligned. So I would suggest getting very clear on what the values are that you want to be talking about and rely on that process. Deborah, what else would you say?
Yeah, one thing I think you're getting at that has been, the plight of my whole digital career is sometimes you'll come to a meeting and they'll say like, what are we going to do online? And it's like, well, what's the strategy? And sometimes I think like I'm a huge proponent. I think digital practitioners should be in leadership positions. I think digital for strategy is where we are. But when you don't have like a candidate with a clear sense of values or a clear reason why they're running, or you don't have a good, if you're, I worked at the Sierra Club for a long time, and if you didn't have a clear theory of change of like, we're going to retire this coal plant by, making it too expensive to operate coal and we're going to get public pressure. If you don't have that strategy, it can be really hard to run a good digital program. And there's this like chicken and an egg, and it's a real skill. And I can't tell you how many meetings I've been in where someone's like, what are we doing online? And I'm like, what are we doing in the campaign? And so it's like, you hopefully are given the opportunity to inform it. And there are ups, definitely digital tactics and digital strategies, and those are a little different. But it's like you can't, win without a great candidate and a clear message and those things. And so digital isn't like the solution to everything. There was one question in the chat about how often to post. I would focus like, I mean, all constant is like the recommendation, but who has the capacity, and it kind of depends on platform. I would like kind of make an intersection of your capacity and your skills, and like if you're really good at making videos, focus on a video platform. If you're not that good at making videos, focus on a different platform, and then also focus a little bit more on like other metrics of like, are you trying to boost engagement? Are you trying to get people to take action and setting some goals? The algorithm changes constantly, and we're all at the mercy of it. And so, uh, no is the answer, but like just make some decisions, like do a little bit of research and make decisions grounded in your capacity, your strengths, and what you're trying to do, and then just set those boundaries, and then hope you crack the algorithm. I'll pass it back to Jess.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say, just to build on what Deborah said, is that if you're at a lower capacity campaign, sometimes we're going to have to be okay with content that is not exactly 100% how we want it to be going out, and having a little bit of tolerance for like, maybe the graphic isn't exactly perfect, or maybe the caption isn't exactly what we wanted it to be. It's probably better to be saying something than nothing in this case, most of the time. So I think having a little bit of tolerance for like learning as we go and improving our content as we go is important too. I see your hand. We don't have any more time. I'm so sorry, but happy to stay on after we kind of let folks go to continue the conversation. We're very grateful to you for being here with us. We're going to send a follow-up email to everyone that signed up for this, which will include the recording. We're going to give you a PDF of the decks, and we will re-up the link to the tools that we dropped as well. If there's anything else you want to see, please shoot us an email at training@arena.run. And we love feedback, so please feel free to give feedback on Mobilize. Take your post-event survey. You can email us feedback as well. And we will see you all again very soon. Thank you all so much.
We have an event on Wednesday with Google and AI office hours, so come hang out with us again. Wednesday? Thursday? I don't know.
Thursday.
Thursday. Thursday. Thanks, y'all.